Yeah, thank you very much, Michelle, for that wonderful introduction. And so we are just going to get started because if people know me, which many of you do, and that when I start to educate, I just keep talking on and on and on because I think it's so vital that people know and understand how their body works and the functional health of the body. So, like Michelle said in that thing, it's not the latest fads and things like that. It's really just getting to the basics of functional health of the cell of the body. So tonight, what I want to educate you on is glucose and insulin and activation. And I want you to understand what the connection of all of this is and why really should you care, and then how activation can really help with the glucose and the insulin imbalances that you might have in your body. So here are some facts about insulin. Insulin is a hormone. Most people only think about insulin in regards to diabetes, but insulin is actually a hormone. It's a humble little hormone, but it has a lot of power inside the body. It's found in every single cell of the body, and it's considered the gatekeeper of the cell membrane. It controls what gets into the cell and what's capable to getting out of the cell. It, of course, is increased by glucose, but it directs many other hormones and it actually controls many other hormones within the body. We're going to talk about that. And it also directs cellular growth. So when insulin is high, things grow. And so we always have to remember that. If you have an overgrowth of anything going on in your body, it's usually that insulin is responsible for that. Why high insulin will not always show up in your blood sugar tests, and this is in your blood work tests. And I'm just going to give some of these examples because if you have, let's say, 150 milligrams of glucose in your bloodstream, that can come from a variety of different ways. And if your pancreas puts about 50 milligrams of insulin into the bloodstream, your blood sugar number is actually going to be 100. Now, if your body puts 250 milligrams in there and the insulin, excuse me, the pancreas puts 150 milligrams of insulin in it, your blood sugar number will still be 100. Same thing will happen if you put a bunch of sugar into the bloodstream. And if your pancreas is able to put 250 milligrams of insulin in the bloodstream, your blood sugar number is still going to be 100. But now here's where it gets a little bit tricky because everybody has an insulin threshold. When the body knows and understands that, remember, insulin allows glucose to get into the cell. But when the cell is already overwhelmed and full of glucose already because of the high amount of glucose that we have in there, or full of nutrients or full of whatever it might be, then finally the cell sends a little signal down to the pancreas that says, no more, I can't handle anymore. And that's what's considered an insulin threshold. And so now, if a person gets 400 milligrams of glucose in their bloodstream, and the body and the pancreas have reached this insulin threshold to say no more, then somebody's blood sugar numbers will show like 150, and then you'll easily be diagnosed with diabetes. But they can be going on for years and years and years before someone has that diabetes diagnosis. Okay. But the same thing can also happen with your A1C. Now, A1C is a much better marker of what's going on from a sugar and insulin standpoint within the body. But it still is the measuring the amount of free glucose attached to the red blood cells. That's actually what your A1C is. But you can see how your glucose can climb. And as long as the insulin is climbing and keeping up with it, your blood sugar numbers will still be the same, even though you're getting more and more glucose into the bloodstream. Okay. Now, these are two excellent, excellent books. So on the top there is Dr. Ben Bickman. He's the one that I studied under, took his coursework. And the other one is Dr. Casey Means. And both of these are just excellent, excellent books to be reading when you're looking at metabolic health. And both of them see that people can have pre-diabetes for 8 to 10 years before a person can even indicate it, because once again, those blood sugar numbers are not always reflective of what's actually going metabolically on within the cell. Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a healthy cell versus an insulin resistant cell. And so, insulin actually opens the door of the cell so that the cell can absorb glucose and absorb nutrients to make the cell work. Okay. And like I said, after a while, all of a sudden the cell feels like it's overwhelmed and the cell feels like it's very, very, very full of nutrients, full of lots of things. And the cell is starting to get bogged down because it's overflowing with lots of glucose. And at that point, what happens? Well, prior to that happening, is that when insulin can open up that door, like it should be, this is a healthy cell, glucose and nutrients can actually get into the cell and toxins and waste products can get out of the cell. And so then it works out great, okay? But when somebody has reached that insulin threshold, the cell puts on a little coating around the cell. And then what it is the cell is considered insulin resistant, meaning like it's not going to open that door to let glucose and nutrients in. And it's not going to open up that door to let toxins and waste particles out. And then that's when the cell is overwhelmed and is just not working quite right, okay? Now, glucose and nutrition, when this gets this little callus on the outside of it, which is considered insulin resistant, glucose and nutrition have a harder time getting in, and waste and cellular debris have a more difficult time getting out. This is considered insulin resistance, and that is what Dr. Ben Bickman quantifies it or looks at it. Now, Dr. Casey Means has a little bit of different way to look at it. If you've ever watched any of her things, she says that right now in our society, I think she said like 83% of people are overwhelmed and have chronic metabolic syndrome going on. And what she's talking about is high levels of oxidative stress. Because if you can't get toxins and cellular waste out, then the balance of toxins within the cell and overwhelming it just overwhelms the cell, and that is called oxidative stress. If you can't get glucose and nutrients inside the cell, the mitochondria, which are the little organelles inside the cell that are supposed to take in glucose and nutrients and convert it into energy that the cell can actually use to do the work that it needs to do. What that does is it causes mitochondrial dysfunction, meaning that the mitochondria can no longer work. And then also, when we have this coating around the outside of the cell chronically feels like it needs help and it's needing to heal. And then that is what's considered chronic inflammation. So, which it's either of the doctors or either of the books that you're looking at, it's basically talking about the same thing, is that the cell is just simply overwhelmed and it's not working quite right. And of course, it's called insulin resistant cell. Okay. Now, our body is made of billions and billions of cells. Okay. But when this whole thing happens, when the billions and billions of cells have that coating on it or insulin resistant, and once again, nutrition can't get into the cell, glucose can't get into the cell for a cell to have the energy to be doing what it needs to be doing, this is how we feel within the cell of our bodies. Okay. Now, insulin resistance, what are some symptoms of insulin resistance? And it's all of these things: low blood sugar or high blood sugar, adult acne and skin tags. If you see someone or if you yourself, especially on the neck, has discoloration there and skin tags, it's a clear sign that that person is in insulin resistance. Excess belly fat. And we're going to talk a little bit later of why belly fat will keep growing. Hormone fluctuations, that you feel tired after meals. You can have decreased testosterone. We'll talk about that as well. Low muscle tone, high triglycerides. You can be craving sweets when the insulin levels are high. Fatty liver, even non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, that is a disease that's on the rise. And then also PCOS or endometriosis. PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. And then gout and other chronic inflammation things. But when we're talking about insulin resistant, the driver of insulin resistance, it's a clear sign that there's too much glucose in the blood. So what we first want to talk about is what brings glucose into the blood? Like, where does it actually come from? And you'll be surprised to know that it comes from multiple places within the body. Most of things that we think about is that glucose comes into the blood through the foods that we eat or the drinks that we drink. Right? Lots of glucose in there, lots of sugars in the foods. Okay. We are not going to talk about that tonight. That's for another workshop. Okay. Dehydration and mineral imbalance as well, or those electrolyte imbalances, that can cause our body to feel like it's in emergency mode and it can increase glucose in the bloodstream. We're not going to talk about that either tonight, okay? Emotional stress or just busyness of life as well puts stress within the body. We're not going to talk about that either. That could be for another one. But what we do want to talk about is environmental toxins that are causing cellular glucose spikes. That's what we want to talk about tonight, okay? Now, the reality of it is that we cannot live in a bubble. And the environmental toxins that we have that are coming into the body put stress on the cells of our body. And that's what we're going to go through tonight. What happens when our cells are stressed because of the many things that are in our environment? Air impurities. There can be fungus or bacteria or parasites within the body, viruses, different car exhaust, just driving down the street and you're breathing in the car exhaust, different chemical sprays, Wi-Fi, cell phones, that really interrupts the electrical components within our cells, which is really the mitochondria. Not standing alone, but a lot has to do with the mitochondria. Different dust mites, different gas off of carpets or paints that we may have put in our bodies. What it really does is it absorbs through our skin, our external skin. It absorbs through our lungs and it absorbs through our sinuses. And all of these impurities affect our cell. But the main point that I'm trying to make here is that we don't have control of this. We have control of how much water we drink, how much minerals we take in. We have control of the food that we eat. We even have control of what we allow stressing us out or the busyness of our life. But what we do not have control of is these kinds of things that are in our air and absorbed through our skin. So what happens when these impurities get absorbed? And we have a cell. So as you see, I have the cell right there. So we absorb these foreign substances or even the Wi-Fi. Like I said, that causes stress on the cell. When the cell indicates I have car exhaust in me, I have a virus in me, I have some bacteria in me, I got smog, I got different gas offs or whatever from the carpet, like I said, linoleum, paint, all those kinds of things. When our cells say, I have that within me, it sends in a little emergency thing over to the adrenal glands. And it says, yo, Mr. Adrenal Gland, just so you know, the adrenal glands sit right on top of the kidneys. And it says, adrenal glands, I need a little bit of adrenaline to help to fight off this impurity that just came in. And I also need a little bit of cortisol to help that as well. Now, cortisol, then that sends a little bit of a message over to the liver. High cortisol levels tell the liver to put more glucose into the bloodstream because the body needs help. And in this case, the body is needing help from some of these environmental toxins that it's absorbing, okay? So whenever there's a stressed cell and the cell is trying to detox the stuff out of it, it's trying to function because of the Wi-Fi kind of shutting down the mitochondria a bit. And the cell needs to heal because it's been damaged because of these pollutants and things. That it says, yo, Mr. Liver, I need more energy to get the work done. So the liver converts stored fats that we have into our body and puts more glucose into the bloodstream. Then what happens after that is the liver itself and then also the bloodstream itself will send a little message over to the pancreas. And it will say, pancreas, I need to get this glucose into the cells of the body to help the cells. So the pancreas then increases insulin so that the glucose that the liver put in there is more bioavailable, meaning that it can get into the cell, okay? Because then that's how the cell can do the work that it needs to be doing. The problem is when this is repeated and repeated and repeated from things that we cannot control, it sends our body into insulin resistance. After a while, because whether the glucose is coming in through your diet or whether the glucose is coming from the liver converting glucose or from converting our stored fats into glucose, we have more glucose in our bloodstream than we need. And all of the environmental toxins that are coming in can alone be overwhelming to the cells of our body. And once again, you can be in this insulin resistance no matter what kinds of foods that you're eating. Now, we always want to be cautious of the foods that we're eating, but somebody can get into this. And I have clients who come in, they're eating perfectly. They got a perfect diet. They're really, really doing well. And so then what we have to really figure out is how to activate their cells to really to help our activators to help to control some of these glucose spikes. Okay. I want to talk also about insulin and estrogen and insulin and thyroxine. And this is where insulin is a controller. Boy, insulin controls so many things. And insulin and estrogen dance together. but insulin is in control. So can you imagine when you're absorbing all of these environmental toxins, puts more glucose into the blood to help your cells to heal, then that raises insulin levels as well. And if insulin and estrogen dance together, that means that they want to be together, okay, and at the same height. Now, insulin and thyroxine is the hormone that is put out by your thyroid that has a lot to do with our metabolism, if we have a fast metabolism or a slow metabolism. But insulin and thyroxine actually repel one another. So as insulin levels go up, thyroxine levels actually go down, okay? But once again, insulin is always in control of this. It's not that humble, tiny little hormone. It really has a lot of control. So during menopause, what actually happens is if our insulin levels are high, and in menopause, our estrogen level now has dropped down because we don't need as much estrogen anymore because we're not in those reproductive years. But insulin commands that the estrogen matches the insulin. Okay. Now, what's very, very unique in regards to this is that insulin is so smart, okay, that it knows that our fat cells, if we can increase the size and the number of our fat cells, that our fat cells actually become hormone factories. So if our ovaries aren't producing enough estrogen and our insulin levels are too high, and our body says, okay, we need more estrogen because insulin commands that estrogen is as high as insulin, it will create either more fat stores or bigger fat stores because fats can become our own hormone factories. And then what does that leave us with is this little muffin top. And we wonder, why did this come? Okay. But it's all about insulin. So many people will focus on the estrogen. They'll focus on all those hormones. But the question is what if we can decrease the amount of insulin that we have so that our estrogen levels don't go up that high and we don't need to be creating more fat stores in order to make more estrogen? Now, in menopause, what I will say with this too is when fat cells become hormone factories, they do not regulate hormones very well at all. And these imbalances then in hormones can go beyond estrogen. The imbalances can be found in progesterone, estradiol, and testosterone because they don't regulate hormones very well at all. So then that's why we can have these ups and downs in regards to it. And then the next thing is that in regards to estrogen, we need to talk about men as well. Because men throughout their life, small amounts of testosterone get converted into estrogen. Just small amounts of it. They are still always estrogen dominant, okay? But, there's men have a feminine side too, okay? So some of their testosterone gets converted into estrogen. But if we know and understand that insulin is in control of the amount of estrogen that we have, what will happen is men, if their insulin is much too high, is they will actually convert more testosterone into estrogen. And so then what sometimes that can be is then men can have high estrogen numbers and low testosterone. So if you've ever seen, sometimes they're supplementing now with testosterone. They're giving testosterone injections and things like that. But the question is, again, what if we can control biologically and on a cellular level, what if we can help to control insulin markers not getting too high? So for men, when they have more estrogen than testosterone, their muscle mass will actually decrease. It will not be as easy for them to build muscle. And that's the biggest difference with it. Okay. Now, once again, insulin is always in control, and even when it comes to thyroxine. Now, thyroxine is put out with the thyroid, and as insulin goes up, the amount of thyroxine goes down. And thyroxine is found in the thyroid. So it's when the thyroid releases thyroxine. But if thyroxine numbers are down, what happens is the thyroid stimulating hormone that actually goes from the pineal pituitary gland to the thyroid to tell it to release more thyroxine, those numbers will be extremely high because the little hormone that tells the thyroid release more thyroxine, release it, release it, release it. So that's why TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, will be very, very high. And because the thyroid's main organ is the main organ of metabolism. So if insulin is high and the thyroid production of thyroxine is diminished, metabolism as well will be decreased. And then that's many times why people struggle with metabolism. And so once again, we always have to be looking at our glucose and our insulin numbers. There are some times in life when we do need high insulin, and that is when a baby who's growing very, very rapidly, because remember, insulin triggers growth. Always remember that insulin triggers growth. So if you have abnormal cellular growth anywhere, you want to be looking at the amount of insulin that you might be having in your body. The other time is a teen who's developing rapidly as well. And then the third time is a woman who's pregnant because she's growing new life. Most people with gestational diabetes started their pregnancy with a high insulin level. And then now the body just pushes the insulin level even higher, and then they will develop gestational diabetes because of all of this, okay? But high insulin, again, causes abnormal growth of cells. Now we can think about that. I mentioned this before, skin tags, cysts and tumors, PCOS, endometriosis, fat, and even different scar tissue that won't resolve itself. Sometimes, not always, but many times it's because of the high insulin levels. Because once again, insulin causes cells to grow, okay? Now, I also want to talk a little bit about activation. And this is why I strongly, strongly believe that we need to activate our cells to have cleaner, more functioning cells before we turn into doing any type of supplementation. And the reason for that is because if you see those four gray things, now our cells are already overwhelmed with the pollutants, with the car exhaust, with the chemical sprays that might be in our air, with the gases of different things. So our cells are already extremely, extremely overwhelmed, okay? And that has already caused a glucose spike, which I mentioned before, from the cell to the adrenal glands to the liver. Okay, so it already has caused a glucose spike. But if the cell has already reached that insulin threshold and it puts a coating on the outside of that cell, and then you're not feeling very well, so you say, I'm going to supplement with some vitamin D. Or my immune system is compromised. I'm going to supplement with some vitamin C. Or I'm extremely, extremely stressed. I'm going to take some B stress. And then, okay, I got some aches and pains, maybe some muscle cramps and things like that. And so I'm going to supplement now with some calcium. And then also, we can also be supplementing with some multivitamins and multiminerals and those kind of things. So you're taking an already stressed cell, a cell that already has shut the doors to anything more coming into it. And you're taking some high dose of supplements. Now, some of it is still going to get in because the cell doesn't completely shut down, and otherwise the cell would just die. So the cell isn't completely shutting down. But if you oversupplement, let's say with vitamin D, only maybe 20 or 30% of that vitamin D is getting in there, but the body is ringing the doorbell and the doorbell of that cell. And what that really makes the cell feel like even more fatigued and even more tired. And so what we really have to do is activate our cells before we try to supplement them, because we need a functioning cell before we try to put more nutrition or even supplement and over supplement the cell. So activation really, from a functional health standpoint, needs to come before we're supplementing. And the world really needs to know about this. The world needs to know that we have to activate our cells before we supplement them. And who should really be telling everybody? You should be telling everybody, because they're not finding this in other areas. So we really need to be spreading the word about all of this activation before we supplement. Now, if you have not had an opportunity to watch this ABC investigative report, this is a must watch. So whoever invited you to this presentation tonight, reach out to them and ask them for the ABC Primetime Investigative Report. But we must activate our cells. And the main thing that they talk about in here is protandim NRF2. That is the main thing that they talk about in that video. It's vital that you get that information. But we're going to just briefly talk about these three different protandims. It's protandim NRF2 is the blue bottle. The silver bottle in the middle is protandim NRF1. And the protandim NAD is on the right-hand side there. And I want to talk a little bit about what these things are doing within the cell of the body. And remember, Dr. Ben Bickman says it's insulin resistance that will shut down or not allow toxin to leave, shuts down the mitochondria, causes chronic inflammation. Dr. Casey Means says oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, and chronic inflammation. And so Protandim NRF2 is proven in human blood work that it works in 100% of the people tested, and it decreases the toxic load on the cell by 40% in 30 days. So it's helping the cell to clean those toxins out better. I mean, by 40% in 30 days. That's incredible. Then Protandim NRF1. That helps to activate the mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria can be shut down because of toxins within it. Toxins actually decrease the amount of mitochondria that are in there. And so the ones that are left over have to work even harder, and it makes them very fatigued. The other thing is that mitochondria are responsible for that cellular energy or ATP. Wi-Fi, cell phone, all those 5G, all of that really, really affects that electrical component within the cell. And so by taking Protandim NRF1, you can actually help and support the mitochondria. And then we have Protandim NAD, and that activates the sirtuins. So many people don't realize, but when the body is inflamed or has inflammation in it, it's because the body is attempting to heal. So when people have chronic systemic inflammation, it means that many, many cells in their body are trying to heal. The body sends a bunch of healing fluids to that area, you get some swelling, and then that is what causes chronic inflammation. But the sirtuins are really responsible to help to clear out the damaged parts of the cell. I like to think of sirtuins as like exfoliators on the inside of the body, where it's exfoliating the old damaged parts of the cell so the body can lay down a new cell. And so these three together are called the trisynergizer, and they are just phenomenal. Now, independently, you can see the graphs on the chart independently, how they do work, and they really help to defend against those environmental toxins that we have no control over. Like not at all, okay? But they can really prevent some of these internal glucose spikes that are going on in the body. I put a little package there behind the trisynergizer because the trisynergizer also comes in this packet. So if you don't want to open up bottles every day, you can just open up a packet every day. So it comes in either way, okay? Now, the other thing that we want to talk about, though, we've talked about what increases insulin, okay? What increases glucose. Damaged cells increases glucose that the body's trying to heal. And then the pancreas increases insulin in regard to that same way. But we want to talk about actually what decreases glucose and insulin, okay? And it's a lot of weightlifting or high muscle density. That actually is what utilizes up more glucose and more insulin. So if you want to bring those markers down, you can be doing some weightlifting. Now, with weightlifting, I'm not saying everybody needs to go to the gym and lift weights, because you can also simply just lift your own body weight, but you have to do it pretty consistently to do that, okay? So you can lift your own body weight by doing some planks, doing some sit-ups, doing some leg lifts, doing some squats, doing some lunges. You don't have to run to the gym and lift weights, okay? You don't need to be doing that. But high muscle density, honestly, is the main reason why when men start incorporating some of these things into their lives, like diminishing some of the glucose that is in the bloodstream, that they tend to lose weight faster. Because men just tend to have a stronger, a deeper muscle dense tissue, and that's because of the testosterone levels that are in their body, okay? But really what you want to be doing is consistent with it, okay? So as weight training and weight lifting go up, then insulin levels start to decrease. And again, we have to keep those insulin levels down in order to have a really functioning cell, okay? However, what we do want to talk about is if somebody already has chronically high insulin levels, their muscles themselves might already be in muscle insulin resistance. And what you really, really have to do, that can be, it says that's a molecular crisis inside your cell. And what you still really need to be doing before you start working out a lot to decrease the insulin levels, if that's your goal, You still need to start with a healthy muscle tissue because if you don't, all that many times will happen is when you start exercising, you're going to actually start to increase oxidative stress, increase in the toxins because if the toxins can't get out and the muscle cell itself is insulin resistant, it's not going to allow those toxins out of the body. Okay. Now we know that Protandim NRF2 can help with that. The other thing is that you can actually increase the mitochondrial dysfunction. We don't want to be doing that. We want to keep our mitochondria very healthy. And that again is Protandim NRF1. Can also cause chronic inflammation. And the NAD, the Protandim NAD helps with that. I have clients that say, I started exercising and I feel worse. Started exercising and I feel worse. And I feel like because you did not start with a healthy muscle tissue. So you still have to activate before you can overpower that muscle. Because what we really want is we want smooth muscle tissue. So around every muscle fiber and around every muscle bundle is skin tissue. And within that skin tissue is collagen. And adequate amounts of collagen makes that muscle glide while exercising. If you don't have adequate amounts, it's like you're rubbing two pieces of sandpaper together. And once again, that can actually increase inflammation in that muscle tissue, and that's not what you want to be doing. Now we have a liquid called True Science Liquid Collagen, and you can prevent a lot of injuries when your muscles are gliding very, very smoothly. And so really this activated collagen could be added as well to really help to get the most out of your exercise and the most out of it, because you don't want to be increasing inflammation when you're trying to exercise. When these things are all into the right healthy muscle tissue, then your exercise will be of benefit to you. And the exercise can help to rescue you from those high insulin levels as well. So what makes our True Science collagen very different than other collagens is that our True Science collagen contains 10 different types of collagen, which is phenomenal. Most collagens only contain one or two, but our collagen contains 10 different types. Now we have 28 different types of collagen in the human body. And when this can supply us with 10 different types of collagen, it's a win-win. The other collagens do not have this many, so it's not as beneficial for all of the cells of the body, and we want to help all of the cells of our body. This is a highly absorbable liquid marine collagen. It comes in the little bottle that you see on the left-hand side there. Yes, you'll get 30 of those for a month because it's liquid collagen. So it's already ready to be absorbed, and then that's why it is so absorbable. It also contains ruby red quinoa that activates our own body to make its own collagen, and that's why it's called activated collagen, because this ruby red quinoa has the chemicals and the chemical constituents in it to help our bodies to make more of its own collagen. It also contains fruit extracts. Fruit extracts naturally contain biotin and vitamin C, and so that helps to preserve the collagen that we already have. It has a great, great, great tasting apple flavor. But we always want to look and know about the study. Well, this actually, after only 8 weeks, it proves that it increases our collagen density by 42% in just 8 weeks. Now, what else is really remarkable is that when you combine our True Science liquid collagen with the Protandim NRF2, it actually increases it 100% in that 8-week time frame. So this True Science activated collagen is a must if you want to be looking at helping with that muscle tissue, and your skin tissue overall is just phenomenal. So really the reality of it is I believe that every single person needs to know, every single person in the world needs to know about cellular activation. And you should be the one really to be telling people. And why? Just imagine. This is like amazing because it's all about the functional health of the cell. Oversupplementing doesn't work. All of these other things don't work if you don't have a healthy cell to start with. So can you just imagine how these products can help to decrease that cellular stress and really honestly prevent the glucose spikes of the things that we don't have any control of within our environment? It helps with more managed glucose and insulin levels, more balanced hormones, more balanced inflammation, more nutrients are able to get into the cell, and less of chasing symptoms. That's what I find with my clients have been on some of these products, I would say for the last 10 years. We're not chasing symptoms anymore. They still come in for some advice and some different things, but we're not just chasing symptoms and playing kind of like whack-a-mole with our health. And what that makes is happier and healthier and more vibrant people. Okay. Now, I know you are only one person, but if you can share this with one person at a time, you can make such a huge, big difference in our world. The other beautiful gift that LifeVantage does have is after this ABC primetime investigative report aired in 2005, there were lots and lots of people that wanted to use Protandim NRF2. And so what they tried to do, they tried selling it in retail stores. But very quickly, what they realized is people didn't know about oxidative stress. People didn't understand cellular activation, and it was kind of an epic fail. So they forgot about, they said, let's not even try to sell it in retail stores. And so in 2009, LifeVantage became a direct selling company. Now, because they don't pay advertisers, they ask us consultants to go out and educate people and help people to understand cellular stress and cellular activation, that they don't pay the advertising. So they really pay commissions to the consultants as a thank you for doing that. Okay. And so really it's just helping others understand activation and sharing LifeVantage with them. And then you can earn some commissions as well. This is the activation company. Now, I only talked about 4 products tonight, but we have other phenomenal and activated products as well. I love our True Science skin and hair care, and I can't express enough to be utilizing those, because when I said how the toxins that we experience in our environment absorb in our face, in our hair, in our skin, it's vital that we are using good and not highly toxic things to be putting on our hair and on our skin. The hair care and the skin care of this line are just phenomenal, and they score like zeros on the Think Dirty app, which means that they're clean and clear and green, and they will not add to the toxic load of the body. Don't be adding to the toxic load of your body. But if you choose to share some of these products with other people, you can just get basic commissions. Some people simply earn some commissions to purchase health and wellness products for themselves. And then other people actually make it like a little side income, maybe enough money to pay a car payment, or probably help with their mortgage or whatever it might be, and then help with groceries, things like that. And then other people actually make it a full-time income as well. So really, it doesn't matter. Kind of the choice is yours. But the reality of it is we cannot live in a bubble at all. And our environmental toxins really, really wreak havoc on the cells of our body without even incorporating any food into our bodies yet. But you always have a choice. You can be a customer, protect yourselves to function with the activation, and then always activate before you supplement. The other thing you can be is be a consultant. You can share the products with those that you love and earn commissions. And you can own your health, your functional health, keeping those cells very, very healthy. And you can own your life with LifeVantage.